And welcome back to the show, everybody. My name is Shane. I'm here with Mark.
Hey.
And we are the Fantasy Football Pros. So today we have a new segment that we are starting. It is Fantasy Football for Dummies by Dummies.
I think that's appropriate.
I think it's well earned.
Well, maybe not calling other people dummies, but calling us dummies. Yeah, that's well earned.
So if you are brand new to fantasy football or you just started last year and you're a little confused about, tactics, lingo, where you should have your priorities on positions, for quarterbacks or running backs, or how many you should have on your team and your roster, how many should you be starting in your flex position. We'll go over all that information for you. We're going to be dumbing this down so that you guys can fully understand everything and not feel like an idiot, to your friends and league mates.
So it's that time of year again. What has happened? Let's go through what's happened recently. We've had the NFL draft. We've had free agent signings. We've had trades. We're now starting to figure out what players are going to be playing in what towns. So this is the time where you're going to start hearing your people, your friends, your work colleagues starting to talk about fantasy football, and they're going to start talking about these things. And when we created this this particular segment calling Fantasy Football for Dummies by Dummies, we're not calling anybody dumb by any means. What that is saying anybody can do this. We've still, after I've been doing this for 30 years now, and there's stupid things I do every year that I look back on and go, why did I do that? And I learn stuff every year. This really is what we're going to try to do over the next couple segments, is break it down for you so everybody can jump in the pool and have fun. This really is a sport, a hobby. Some people consider it money making. Whatever you want to consider it, this challenge is so much fun, and we want more people to get involved with it. So that's why we're doing this segment, to make it less intimidating for everybody. We want you to be able to jump in and have fun with your friends, or create new friends, have the bragging rights at work, or be able to talk about it during lunch with other coworkers and have fun with it. This is what we're doing. I mean, it's young people are playing this. Old people are playing this. Football players are playing this themselves. Porn stars are playing this. Everybody's getting involved with fantasy sports. Of course, we concentrate on fantasy football. So we just want you to understand, get a basic lingo of it all, and then we will help you find out what league is the best league for you to get into. But what we want to cover today really is the different terminologies, so you feel comfortable when you're listening to or talking about this subject. Does that make sense, Shane?
Yeah, I'm learning new tactics every single year and trying new things out and seeing what works and what doesn't. And it's just like every year, you're just refining your strategies and trying to get ahead of the game and working on those strategies before they become popular.
And it's interesting. Last year was the first year I joined a league with Shane, and his scoring was a little different than other leagues I had been in before. I have a different strategy this year going into the draft than I did last year because of the scoring tactics, the scoring that they have in this league. I got to change it up a little bit. It's not what I'm used to, but hopefully now I've got slapped enough where I've learned and can continue on and do better this year and take the whole damn thing down. But it's funny, and I don't know if you ever felt this, Shane, but when you're doing this and you're creating your strategies you want to do for a draft or for a trade or for pickups. So when you hit a strategy that works, you get this sense of euphoria. All of a sudden you thought this might work, you're hoping this might work, and it works, and you're like, I can do this. I can do this. I can win this thing. It's the same thing in golf. You can shoot horrible the whole entire round of golf, and then all of a sudden you hit one great shot, and you're like, wow, I can play this game. I got it. I can do this. It's the same thing with fantasy. And I don't know if you ever got that feeling when you did that, when, during during the year or something you've done as a strategy where it's like, holy shit, that actually worked.
Yeah, I'd say for the first 5 or 6 years playing fantasy football, I was just an average player that probably thought he was better than he was. And then I amped up my research game and started just listening to a bunch of podcasts. And instead of just listening, verbatim on their information, I was taking their information and working it into my own strategy. And then one year, one of our league mates goes, Shane, like, how the hell did you nail this draft? Like, who are you listening to? Who's your insider? Or like, what websites are you using? And that just made me feel really good that someone in our league that I've been competing against for a while was like, whoa, 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 you just stepped up the game and I don't like this. I was like, oh, yeah.
You just dropped the mic.
Yeah. And then I started building teams that were they just looked gross. Like my flex spots were better than most people like wide receiver 1s and 2s.
So let's start off basic information that helps you understand the lingo. So ADP, that is average draft position. Shane, where do you go to find out this information?
There's tons of websites. We like to use Fantasy Pros. I think it's pretty accurate. You just go into any current like rankings. Actually, there'll be categories that say like ADP, average draft position. If you can go there, and that's just showing you what is the average position that they get drafted in. So if it says like the 1.04, that means that they're being drafted. Their average draft position is in the first round at the number 4 spot.
You're going to hear this term a lot as you start doing more and more research into fantasy football and you start listening to more people. The ADP is used all the time. That really is the measuring block of when you know what that is, where you know where to find it, you know where the value is. This is when you start doing your draft, you know where the value is for a certain player's position. And then you can decide at that point, is it worth taking him now or can I take him in the next round? This is going to help you throughout a draft. Another term we want to talk about, bench players. So when you're doing fantasy football, when you're setting up your team, every week you are dedicating certain players to be in your starting lineup. The ones that are not starting for that week, they are called your bench players. And those bench players, their points do not count for the week. But you are keeping them on your team and on the bench, and they're not available to any other team owner. And then another term you'll hear is breakout player. So the breakout player is just someone who really outperforms more than what he's done throughout the whole entire career. That is a breakout player. It's someone who outperforms what he's done over his career.
Yeah.
The next thing you're going to hear is boomer bust. I do love boomer bust players. This is the draft pick that can go either way. It's going to be either really bad or really good. This is a player that you want to draft this type of player in a best ball league. And we'll talk about what a best ball league in more depth when we get to that segment about what league you want to join. But basically a best ball league really quickly is you draft a team and that is it. You don't touch it again. That it doesn't matter. You don't have to put anybody in a lineup or this or that. It's just they're all on your lineup and they take the points, the best points for the week from each player. So a boomer bust player is great to have on one of those teams because he might suck for 8 weeks. And then all of a sudden, 1 week, he has this breakout, this unbelievable game, that boom, that boom week, right? And then all of a sudden, that one player, for some reason, did this, and he won a week for you. And then you might not hear from him again. But it's good to have those players on your team in a best ball league because they're the ones that are going to win you a week, 1 week or another.
Yeah, these are the players that, here's another term, they have a high ceiling and low floor. So what that means is that when you have your ceiling would be the most points that you could get per game, and it does vary per player. And then the floor would be your base minimum amount of points that you will score per week. So these guys are dangerous if you're not in a best ball league because they could give you a horrible, horrible game and they could just give you the 0 points, or they could be, the guy that gets you the win for the week because they just scored a ridiculous amount of points.
And you do want consistency. You don't really want to use a boomer bust type of player, especially in middle rounds, not drafting in middle rounds. Drafting in later rounds, okay, you can see that, like you hold on to them. But then you're still, if you got them on your bench, what week do you use them? Because you never know when they're going to have that week. You could look at all the analytics of it and say, okay, this team is horrible against the slot receiver, so I'm going to use them this week. But it helps you, but it hurts you if you're playing them every week, because you are going to get nothing for him on so many weeks, and then just all of a sudden 1 week or 2 weeks he's going to do really great for you. So that's why I tend to stay away from these guys, except in the best ball leagues. Bounce back player. For a bounce back player, that's someone that had to have something to begin with. This is not a breakout player. This is not a sleeper. This is someone that had a career at one point or had good seasons, and then they dropped off the face of the earth, for a year, where all of a sudden they had a horrible year. And then now you think, okay, this is a year that he does it again. So if he does do it again, that is called a bounce back player.
Yeah, that's mainly goes to veterans that got injured. So obviously their production went down because they weren't playing football. And then they come back, and whenever a player gets injured, there's always that risk of, will they bounce back to what they normally produce, or will they start their incline?
So for instance, Shane and I both agree that Ezekiel Elliott can have a bounce back year. He didn't have a good year last year. We think because of a healthy Dak Prescott, we think that this year he's going to have a bounce back for what he used to have, because we're not going to look at last year. We're going to look at, we have an opportunity this year to get him at a value. So break a bounce back player, he would be considered that if he comes back this year. Bust, yeah, that's another term you'll hear. Bust, buster, busted, busty. It is what it sounds like. He just did not perform what was expected.
Yes, typically a player that you drafted higher in the draft, and you're expecting good things, and they don't even start on your rosters because they just keep on underperforming every single week.
So, for instance, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, if you look at him as a football player and what he did for Kansas City, he was not a bust to them. But if you look what he was for a fantasy team, or someone that for some reason was being picked up in the first round, he was being drafted way, 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 way over his head. He never should have been drafted in the first round, but that's where he was going because the hype train was there on him. He was considered a bust for fantasy teams, but not for football in general, not for real life football. He wasn't considered a bust, but for fantasy teams, he was a buster.
Yeah, unless you draft him in the third or fourth round, then you're fine with his production.
When you're doing your draft, there's one thing that you want to keep an eye on, and that's the bye week. What a bye week is, this is when your player does not play that week because his team does not play that week. So, for instance, the Chicago Bears, I think their bye week was week 9. So there are no point values for the Chicago Bears players during week 9. That is a bye week. This is when you're going to want to take someone off your bench and put them in that starting spot, because you don't want 0 points. So when you're doing the draft, you want to make sure you don't draft like 8 players for the same bye week, because that could hurt you. If you're looking at 3-4, that's okay, but you don't want to be going way overboard in the same division if they all have the same bye week.
Yeah,
if that makes sense.
And if you do have that, that's when people start talking like, "Well, week 8, I'm going to lose." It's like football hasn't even started yet, but okay. It's like, all my starting roster is going to be on the bench.
It's happened to me a couple times where I'm like, oh, damn, I didn't realize this when I was doing the draft. What did I do? But I think that only happened to me 1 year and that's really, really, really before I started getting into it even more than I am now, of course. When I first started out, I wasn't paying attention to that. And it bit me 1 year. But 1 week shouldn't keep you out of the playoffs if you have a good team.
Yeah.
All right. Cheat sheet. That is a term that you'll hear a lot going into the draft. It's a tool that's used for draft purposes that ranks players according to their projected fantasy points. You can get this tool. You can buy this tool online. You can subscribe to services for these tools online. You can create your own cheat sheet. It's really how you want to go with it. Now, Shane, what do you do for a cheat sheet? What do you like to use?
How I make my cheat sheet is I listen to my favorite podcasts and see how they're ranking all their players, and then I kind of form my own cheat sheet. And anyone going into a draft should have some form of cheat sheet, either mentally in your head or written down on like an Excel app, and it's like right next to you during the draft. But they are there to help you, show you the different tiers of players. It's like really helpful to have if you see that there are, let's say, 3 running backs still left in the second tier, and there is 1 wide receiver left in the first tier. It's like it's telling you should be taking that wide receiver because the value is at that wide receiver, and if you let that guy go, then you're dropping 1 or 2 tiers down.
I look to see and look. I do in depth on each player, on what team they're playing for. Did that team make any additions, let's say, to the offensive line? Where they helped out? And I start ranking. I'll rank the players according to what I think their projections are going to be that year, what their fantasy totals are going to be. I fill that out myself. All right, so I have that with it. But then I also have with it, which I think is very important, I use the Fantasy Pros, which takes an average of all the major, Yahoo, ESPN, all these different sites that are doing the mock drafts, and it lists what players are being drafted in what position on average. So I have that along with my rankings. I'll have that along with, because maybe I have someone ranked higher than other people are drafting, and that's a position at that point. Then I might be able to wait an extra round before I pick a guy, even though I have him higher than someone else, just because of how I have them ranked and how other people have them ranked could be different.
Yeah.
So you take that all into consideration. But I think that's a really good tool to have for a cheat sheet, is the average draft position for each player, so you know what the average person is thinking about. Doesn't always work, but at least you know what the average person is thinking. All right. So, commissioner, I'm going to let Shane take this one since he's the commissioner of the league we're in. What is a commissioner, commish?
So the commish is the person that gets the crap end of the stick, I'd say. They create the league. They do all the work. They don't really get any benefits out of it. They make the rules for the league. They set up a scoring system. They make sure that their league is full, so it's ready to go. They normally have to mediate between other managers. There are rifts that happen in fantasy football, normally involving some kind of trade, and normally the commission will have to get involved. Just in fantasy football, people can get really heated because they're just really passionate about the game, and some people just might want to quit just because they're just so frustrated. So the commission will have to get involved to make sure that doesn't happen. They also have to get involved to make sure that there's no funny business, that no one's cheating or doing any slide deals.
So what we did in our league last year with Shane, which I thought was brilliant, because I had not been involved. Most of the time, the commissioner is the one that makes the decision if it's a valid trade or not. What we did in our league last year is we put a commission together. We put 3 team owners together, the commissioner and 2 other team owners, to be the commission on what was a valid trade, what was a fair equity trade or not. And we just needed 2 out of the 3 of us for the majority. It didn't have to be unanimous. It was just majority. 2 out of 3 of us had to agree on which way to go, yay or nay for the trade. And I think that was brilliant. I think that worked out great, because that wasn't all on one person. One person couldn't blame for everybody. It was a perfect way to do it.
Yeah, I'd say it could be a little difficult to find a good commissioner because some commissioners are shady themselves, and they'll help their family members get a player or change rules mid-season just so that it mainly benefits their team. That's why I created a league, because I had a commissioner like that and I was just done with it. So I made a league where I felt it will be as fair as possible for everyone, and that I don't get any extra edge over anybody else at all. So that's why I made the trade committee. That way it wasn't just me doing the voting, and that there were other people that I trust their fantasy football insight, so that if it does get rejected, then that means that it just seems a lot more legit, and it's not shadiness of, no, I don't want those players to go to this team because I'm playing them next week and I don't want to lose.
So if you are joining a league, you might want to find out how this whole thing works just with the trades, with the commissioner. And it's not a bad thing you can make a suggestion. If you're in a league now, this is a great way to go. So you can make the suggestion and put up the vote in your league. Hey, do we want to go this way? This sounds really good. It's just, like the one thing you got to make sure it's not like two brothers both being on the commission.
Yeah.
Because then that's just opens the door for shady shit.
And you definitely don't want a dictator.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Cut drop. Sounds pretty cut and dry on this one. This means you're letting go of somebody on your team. Some people consider cutting them from your team. Some people consider dropping them from your team. It's the same thing. So cut or drop, it means you're letting go of somebody on your team.
Yeah, you're making space for a free agent or a trade.
Yes. Yeah, maybe all of a sudden some player is starting to show signs of life and you're like, ooh, no one has him on their team. You want to pick him up? Well, yeah, you're going to have to drop someone first before you pick him up. Or cut someone, however you want to state it. All right. So the draft, that is another term you're going to hear because that is what you will be doing is a draft. It's not like you are getting random players selected for you to your team. No. You are drafting them. You are the man in charge or the woman in charge. You are that person. So this is done prior to the NFL season starting because you cannot have a draft after the season already started. This is done prior to the NFL season. This is where you select your players. It can be done two different ways. It can be done in an auction draft or a serpentine draft. Some people call it a snake draft. The difference being is in the snake draft or the serpentine draft, let's say it goes before the draft happens, you'll be randomly given a draft position. So let's say your position is number 1. You get the first draft. You get the first pick of the draft. Woohoo! Congratulations. But guess what? They're going to go, let's say it's a 10-team league. You're going to draft first position, second position, third position, all the way to 10th position. And then you think, oh, so the second round, I get the first pick again. No. A snake draft is then it goes just the opposite way. So then whoever had the 10th pick will have the 11th pick. Whoever had the 9th pick will have the 12th pick. And it goes forward. So if you're selecting, you get lucky enough to get the first pick of the draft, guess what? Your next pick is not going to be till the 20th pick of the draft. So that's a serpentine or a snake draft. An auction is when you are actually saying, hey, I want this player. I'm going to start the bidding on this player for 50 cents or $1. You'll have an auction budget that you cannot go over. And when players are brought up, lay it out there. It's like, it's like watching Storage Wars. 50, 50, 50, I hear 50, 50, 50. Do I hear 50? Do I hear 60? Do I hear 60? 26? And that's what it is. It really, it's an auction. And then the FAB, it's spelled FAAB. And what that means is Free Agent Acquisitions Budget. So this is what I'm talking about, putting money in a kitty. This is how some leagues will do this. You are given, let's say, a $200 FAB budget. So you have a league entry fee of, let's say, $200 or $100. And then you have a FAB budget of, let's just say, $100. So you have $100 over the course of the season to pick up free agents. So what would happen when you need a player, you have a player you like that's on a free agent at that point and you want him on your team, you would then put a call buy on him. Let's say you really like the player and you have a $100 budget. You're going to put $10 out there for that one player for that week for your FAB, right? So if you win that bid, let's say your bid wins, he is on your team, that $10 goes into a kitty. At the end of the year, that gets split up. Some people say that kitty goes to the person who scored the most points over the year. Some people say that will get split between first and second place. Each league is different, but that's what that FAB money would be used for. Okay, so if you don't get a chance to bid again if someone outbids you. You have to put your best foot forward, and you got to think ahead, thinking what bid is going to win this particular player,
and that's how
you play it out. Yeah, and is it worth it? Right. So it's an interesting concept to use. Instead of just using a waiver priority, this is a way that, hey, it who knows, you might be the only person even putting a bid on this player that's not even on his radar, and you outbid yourself. You never know. But it's a cool way to do it. But that's also another way. I wouldn't suggest that for a first timer, because that's a whole different ball game. That's someone who's been doing fantasy for a little bit. I wouldn't get involved with your first league being something with a fat budget. But that's just me. What do you think, my friend? Have you ever done that?
No, I've never been involved in an auction league before because they are very complicated and a lot different than a regular league, I'd say.
Yeah, it is. It is. And trust me, that is more homework than some people want. The next term we're going to talk about is flex. Shane, take it away. Talk about flex, because you are Flex Armstrong.
So your flex position will vary on your league. So let's start off basic. So your starting rotation, you're always going to have, most leagues, one quarterback, two wide receivers, two running backs, and a tight end, a defense, and a kicker. And then your flex are the spots that you can kind of throw in different positions in there. So most flexes is going to be a running back, wide receiver. Our league, we do have tight ends in there, so you can throw them in the flex. And then there's other leagues, Superflex, where you can throw the quarterback. We'll get into that one a little bit later. So yeah, depending on your scoring system and your team layout, it will depend if you're throwing in, running backs or wide receivers, or if you have two amazing tight ends, maybe you're throwing a tight end in your flex spot too.
Which is great when you're playing daily fantasy. When you're playing daily fantasy, because tight ends are always cheaper than running backs or wide receivers, you can use more of a budget toward quarterback or wide receiver or running back if you're using your tight end at a tight end position and a tight end at the flex position. That's just another strategy to use for daily fantasy. FPPG, fantasy points per game. Go ahead, Shane, take it.
So that is pretty much how you said it. It's how many points that they score when they play a game. So that will vary from their total points because players get injured or they get benched. So you could have a player that has more points per game, but in the overall rankings, he is way lower just because he missed, 3 games. So those 3 games he wasn't producing. But in the 3 games, or in the other games that he was in there, he was producing more. It just makes him a better player.
Now, when you're looking at fantasy points per game for a player, you also have to see, was it Yahoo? Was it DraftKings? Was it FanDuel? ESPN? Each league has a different scoring system. So when you want to do this is you want to see which scoring system is your league going to use, and then you could look at the fantasy points per game for that particular scoring system. You don't want to overvaluate someone by looking at, look at all the points he scores per game. But yeah, that's a different type of league than you're playing. So you want to do apples to apples on that. Free agents, just what you think it is. This is a player that's currently not on anybody's team. That is a free agent.
They are free for you to pick up.
That's where you're going to look on when you're looking to, this guy's underperforming, this guy got hurt, whatever. You can look on the waiver wire, the free agent wire. It's the same thing. You can look either way, see what's out there. That's the pool you're going to be selecting from to change up your team. The handcuff. Handcuff is when you draft or pick up a stud player's backup. So, for instance, let's go with Dalvin Cook. If you drafted Dalvin Cook in the first round, you might then want to go back at the 12th round or 11th round and also draft Madison, his backup, because maybe he's was hurt during the preseason and only didn't play in the games yet, was going to play for the regular season. You might want to do that just in case he's not ready for the regular season. Then you want the guy who's going to get the workload. You might do that if someone traditionally gets hurt every year for missing a few games. You might want to draft someone else as handcuff someone else so you can dangle it over their head. People do it for different reasons. People do it for trading possibilities. Some people do it because they're just protecting their own team. That's a handcuff.
Yeah, I'd say for the most part, it's mainly used for if you have a high-end running back that is injury prone, or he was injured last year and you're not sure if you will get the full workload right off the bat. So you draft them as a safety net so that you're still getting the running back production from that team. But you just have to be careful because you need to make sure that the backup is worth it. Because, yeah, you're getting a backup. You're backing up Dalvin Cook, let's say. And Madison is a good running back, but let's say he wasn't. And Dalvin Cook gets hurt, and now you have his backup, but he's still not producing for you. So it's kind of redundant to be drafting that player. So you want to have good backups.
But yeah, you don't want to pick up a backup who's a scrub, even though they're going to get the workload. Like, for instance, Pittsburgh traditionally was a great team to draft a handcuff because traditionally they're just a great running team. They have a scheme that's a great running scheme. So it didn't really matter on Pittsburgh who was running the ball. They were running the ball well.
Mm-hmm.
So that works that way. There are a lot of experts out there that just believe in this wholeheartedly, and there's some that don't. But it's definitely a strategy that can really work out for you, or it doesn't, and later on you end up dropping them because you are in need, because all of a sudden people on your team got hurt and you are in need to pick up somebody, and they're going to be the most viable ones to let go.
Yeah, I'd say the only reason you'd want to do that is, like I said, if you have that high-end running back that is injury prone or is labeled injury prone, and you just want that safety, or that an owner has a running back that probably really wants the backup, so you draft them so that you can trade for him later, or trade him back to that guy and get something out of it that you don't know what your team need is. Like you could fill in like your tight end spot that you thought you were strong at, but it turned out that you weren't.
IR, injured reserve. So this is when some leagues have injured reserve lists, some don't. An injured reserve list is when you are allowed, let's say, 3 spots for injured reserve players. So if one of your players gets hurt, but is still going to make it back before the season is over, you can put them on the injured reserve list and then pick up someone off of the free agent pool or waiver pool to put on your team without losing a player.
Yeah, it doesn't affect your starting. It doesn't affect your roster. So you can put this guy in IR. He's injured. You can replace him. And then when they come back healthy, you can put him back into your starting lineup or on your bench, and then just get rid of a player that he's going to take his spot. So it's a great way of, if a guy gets hurt for a few weeks, it doesn't hurt your team as much because you don't have that hole because you did replace him, but you also didn't lose him. You didn't have to put him in free agency, so no one else is going to be able to get them unless you end up dropping them.
All right. League winner. That's another term that we hope you all get to learn very well.
Mm-hmm. So your league winner, those are players that you drafted late, like in the teens, maybe even the last pick of your draft. And they just turned out to be an amazing player. Like last year, if you drafted James Robinson and now he turned out to be an RB1 for you, that's a league winner. That's somebody that was not projected to produce anything, and he turned out to be one of the best running backs in fantasy football.
For instance, last year, a league winner for people, probably this man Cam Akers was a league winner for him. This is someone that was not performing early in the year, and then he was on waiver wires. People picked him up, and then all of a sudden, come the end of the year, the last 5 weeks of the year, he went off. That's really when you're going to win the league, that come into the playoffs. So he is considered a league winner because all of a sudden he just came out of nowhere at the right time to lead people into the playoffs and win their league.
And Justin Jefferson, in a lot of drafts, he wasn't even being drafted.
Yeah.
And he turned out to be one of the best wide receivers in the game.
Exactly.
That's a league winner. But it's like your team would be fine without them, and then you add this super late draft pick, and then you throw them in, and now your team just looks amazing with this player in there.
So that's a word we all want you to learn: league winner. All right, mock draft. We've talked about mock drafts on our podcast religiously. This is the best way for you to get better at drafts is by doing these mock drafts. Mock drafts happen before your normal draft. These are simulated drafts that you can go on to. For instance, ESPN has them. Fantasy Pros has them. These are things you're going to go on. You're going to sign on there, and you're going to join a draft for the night. Let's say you got an hour to spare, and you say, you know what, I want to practice. This is what you're going to do. That's called a mock draft. It's a great tool to use because what that does, it really gives you can test out the different strategies. Like in our podcast, what we've been doing, we've had 4 mock drafts, and every mock draft we had a different strategy just to show you what players are available if you use this strategy or what players are available if you use that strategy. This is a great way for you to try out your strategy and see if it works, because then you can look back at the sum of the after the draft's over, you can look at the sum of your team and say, oh, I don't like how that worked out, or oh, I really liked how that worked out. This is a great tool to use.
Yeah, it's just a practice run. And there are 2 different kinds. You can have a mock draft. Most of them are with, I guess, a computer, AI. But there are drafts out there against people, which, it's going to be a longer draft because it's actual people doing the draft picks. But it's more realistic. The only issue with mock drafts that I find is that it's not really going to be anything like your real draft because, you have your own league settings, and then you have different types of players, and people are fandoms of certain teams, so then they're going to value, the Cincinnati Bengals higher than the Kansas City Chiefs just because they really like them. So I've learned that you can do mock drafts and consistently get players in certain rounds, and you're like, okay, in the 3rd round, I'm getting DJ Moore, and then it comes down to the draft, and DJ Moore is now drafted in the 2nd round, or you decide to pass on him because there's other value, and now he's actually in the 4th round, and you've never seen him in the 4th round in a mock draft.
Yeah, the mock draft game. But I'm going to say one other thing. What you're talking about, like people are homers. If you know the players in your league, if you know the other team owners, you can kind of find their weakness. You might know their weakness by maybe the guy's a huge Vikings fan, and you kind of, if you know these people, you know who their favorite players are, and you can use it to your advantage by knowing about where they're going to select those type of players. And if you want that same player, you might have to take him here. Or, I like this player. Kirk Cousins is still there. I know he's going to pick Kirk Cousins because he's a huge Minnesota fan. So I know I can get my player later. Those are things you can look at. So the next thing we're going to talk about next term is called PPR, points per reception. And this can differ with every league. So this is another thing a commissioner decides how they're going to run the league. They're going to run it where it's a standard scoring league where you get no points per reception. Do we do it with a half point per reception or a full point per reception? So these are things that, if you want to find out ahead of time before you join a league, I kind of like, and I know Shane does also, getting the full point per reception. There's a strategy to that with the players that you select.
Yeah, and what that basically means is that every time that they catch the ball, they get a point. Doesn't matter how many yards they get or if they got a touchdown. If they caught it, they automatically get that point.
Hell, you can actually lose yardage and you still get that point.
Yeah, and you can actually gain points doing that. So, the guys that are getting more targets and more catches are more valuable in those types of leagues, including, like workhorse running backs that get a lot of receptions. They tend to outproduce a lot of other people.
Hence, like a Alvin Kamara.
Yeah, he's a great example. He catches as many balls as most wide receivers.
All right. Projections. Projections is a term that you're going to hear going into the draft. This is where experts project how many fantasy points the player will have. You might want to do the projections yourself. You might want to look at all the different experts and see what they're all saying and say, you know what, I'm going to kind of look off of this guy, and this is what I think it's going to be. And you can have that projection set out. And again, that's something you'd use as a draft tool for a cheat sheet.
Yeah. And the projections, so they're normally not, they're not 100% accurate at all.
No one's that good. I'm going to combine these two next categories together. QB1, QB2, RB1, RB2. They're both used in the same terminology. They're both used and valued at the same way.
So what that means is if you are in a 10-team league, your QB1s are the top 10. If you're in a 14-team league, your QB1s will be the top 14.
Let's say it's a 10-team league. If you're ranked, if a quarterback is ranked stat wise, fantasy point wise, from 1 to 10, they're considered a QB1. If they're from 11 to 20, they're considered a QB2. Same thing with running back. Same thing with wide receiver. It's all the same way they're looking at it. So it goes to your league. However many teams you have in your league, say you have 12 teams, the top 12 is your running back 1, QB1, wide receiver 1.
Yeah.
Your second 12 is a quarterback 2, running back 2, wide receiver 2.
And for the most part, your team's just going to be consistent of no worse than, RB4 or wide receiver 4. If you're getting those 5 guys, those guys are not producing points, and they're not projected to do that unless, they get like 2 injuries ahead of them.
Exactly. All right. Scoring. Let's go to the standard scoring. This is the type of league where you receive 1 point for every yard gained, running, receiving, what have you, throwing. Then you also get the basic points that is listed in scoring. So scoring is what your league determines a TD is valued at, what your league is valued of receiving touchdown or a throwing touchdown. It could be an interception. It could be a fumble recovery. It could be a sack. It's what your team, what your league decides those values are. So that's standard scoring.
So standard league is just your regular league. You don't get anything extra for reception. And you can get points from a multitude of different things that can happen. It can be your quarterback passing. It could be him getting a sack, an interception, a pick six, which is when a quarterback throws an interception and the defense runs it back for a touchdown. That can count against them. You get points from everywhere. So standard would just be like the regular. And then when you add in PPR, that just means it's the same thing as a standard, but they also get 1 or half a point or maybe even a quarter of a point per catch.
Well put. So again, that's going to be something that you'd want to decide if you want to be in a standard scoring league or PPR league. We like the PPR leagues, which just makes it more fun.
Yeah. It makes it like where some players that are irrelevant are good. Like Nyheim Hines in a standard league last year was not that good, but because he got a lot of catches from the backfield, it made him worthwhile. Like he was a producer.
That's an excellent description there, sir. All right, Superflex, we kind of hit on that already. Go ahead and throw that out there.
So Superflex is when you are able to throw in a quarterback in your flex position. Being new to fantasy football, you'll learn that quarterbacks tend to score the most in your league, depending on your league settings. Like our league settings, our quarterbacks can score 3 times as much as your top wide receiver or running back. So putting those guys in the flex, it just changes everything. So your draft, instead of going in and trying to land a solid running back right off the bat, you could be aiming for a quarterback just because now you are starting 2 of them. And if you are putting in a tight end, a running back, or a wide receiver in those positions in a super flex, you're probably going to lose.
We've talked about sleeper.
Not exactly.
So I want to go a little more in depth on it.
Yeah, so sleepers they're like a mythical creature. It's like everyone claims that they have it, but no one can really like claim onto it until it actually like comes to fruition. So your sleeper is someone that is not being valued too high, and you think that there's huge value in that because no one else is actually seeing it. And you think that they're going to have, a breakout year this year. And typically that could be the second or third year if someone's in the NFL. So like towards the end of the draft, those are the players I'm looking for. Like they're not projected to score that many points, but you see a path or someone has informed you of a path that they could be, into that league winner category.
So here's the funny thing. So I was talking all sorts of crap last year. In the last round, I selected Paris Campbell from the Colts. I'm like, man, Phillip Rivers, he loves his slot receivers. Paris Campbell, that's what he is. Oh man, I got to steal the draft. I'm like, man, this is the sleeper of the draft. You guys let me. I'm talking crap. I'm talking really
Oh
big crap.
no, he's talking major shit. He's like, you
Yeah.
dumbasses, let this league winner. You let me draft him on my team. You guys are a bunch of dumb fucks. Is like he was just going off. And we're like, you sure? Like, all right. And in Mark's mind, that was a sleeper because nobody else valued him that way.
Yeah, and then the man got hurt and lost the whole year.
Yeah.
And the crap I caught for that coming back to me, oh my god. I just wanted to hide in the corner going, oh damn, I just
Because
done messed that shit up.
you went off on the
Oh,
guy.
I did. I seriously, I did. I said, you guys, thank you for handing me this whole league. I'm winning this damn thing now. Oh, it was good times. Good times.
So sleepers are obviously high risk, high reward players. They could completely bust and you're dropping them, in week 3, or they could be an amazing asset and you find out in week 1 just how good they are.
Yeah.
Like Alvin Kamara, when he was a rookie, no one was really drafting him, especially high. Like if he was being drafted, it was in the late rounds, like one of the last rounds. And that guy was a sleeper. He was also a league winner.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the guys you're targeting at the end of the draft.
Yes. All right. Starting lineup. These are the players that you select from your team to be in your lineup for that week. That is self-explanatory. The other guys on your team that you don't select to start that week are your bench players.
Yeah. Are they scoring points for you or no? Pretty much.
So, all right. Streaming. Streaming is something that I've lived by many years. And that is not watching movies, even though I do love to stream movies on Netflix. This is not having a dedicated starter week in, week out. Let's say, for instance, defenses. You didn't want to waste a draft pick on a defense. You went another route. This is when you just week to week look for the best possible scenario. What defenses that haven't been on, that aren't on people's teams, and you select that defense week in, week out, and stream it to whatever you think is going to work best for you.
Yeah, streaming is normally for the defenses, tight ends, and quarterbacks. And if you drafted those positions late, then possibly your main guy is not that great, but he does produce on occasion, depending on the defense. So you're just streaming like quarterbacks to play against a really bad defense because some defense is like, doesn't matter who the quarterback is, they're going to score points. So just get that guy on your team for that week. So and you could just be borrowing them. You see, they're on your team, and you just keep on cycling through your 2 or 3 guys that you keep streaming, or you're picking somebody up from free agency and you're starting him that week, and then next week you're going to start this completely different guy that's in free agency because they're playing against a really bad offense.
This strategy is also used quite a bit when you have a starter go down, and there's really not one particular player that you want to put on your team to say, okay, he's going to take this role now. He's going to fill it right. It might not work out that way. So maybe you stream week to week a different player every week off a waiver wire until your guy is healthy.
Yeah.
All right. Team defense is a term we used already. We kind of talked about it in scoring. Team defense is used in most leagues. There are some leagues that have individual defensive players. That's called IDPs. Some leagues use that where they're using the stats of individual players, where you draft individual defensive players. Most leagues do not do that. Most leagues do a team defense. So you will play each week, you will play a defense and get points for interceptions, get points for fumble recoveries, get points for
lack of offensive points.
Exactly. And that, so you're using a team defense for that instead of drafting individual players.
Yeah, where the individual players getting points just for that one guy. That one guy, if he gets a tackle, or if he gets a sack, if he gets an interception, then you get points.
All right. A trade, well, trade is what it sounds like. It's when two teams are searching player A for player B, or player B for player C. It's whatever the case may be. It's teams switching their players.
Mm-hmm.
All right, transaction. So we talked about a little bit with the FAB, right? We've talked about a little bit of it. What a transaction means anytime you change players through waivers or trades. Now, some leagues will charge transaction fees. And again, this is a great way to put more money in the kitty to make more money at the end of the year for team owners. And some will charge a transaction fee. For every transaction you do, it might be $1. That would have killed you last year, Shane.
Yeah, I would have lost $80, I think.
So anyway, that's what a transaction is.
And some leagues can have transaction limits. So you can have, like, let's say 15 transactions throughout the entire year, and that really limits, people from just picking up everybody from free agency. It adds more strategy into the game, because you have to think really, really hard. Do you really want this guy? Because there's now going to be 18 weeks of football. It's like, do you want that guy? Do you think he's going to be worth it?
And speaking of think if it's worth it, let's go to the next term you will hear quite a bit, especially in draft time, and that is value.
Mm-hmm.
Take it away.
So value is, again, like you're going back to that tier list, and you got a running back that's in the third tier, and you've seen that there's guys in the fourth tier that are already being drafted. And then you look at, like, wide receivers, and they're already past their third tier. They're in their fourth tier. So you got this one guy that's in a tier all by himself who should have already been drafted, but for whatever reason, people got scared off. But I guess like a huge value now, because he should have been drafted, a round or two earlier. So now you're just getting that great value. So during a draft, you almost always go for the value. Like, how's this, for instance? We play in a keeper league. I have Christian McCaffrey. I can keep him for the first round. I also have J.K. Dobbins, and I can keep him in the 7th round. Now, Christian McCaffrey would not be a value because he's already being drafted in the first round. So keeping him in the first round is no value at all. But keeping J.K. Dobbins for a 7th round pick is huge value, because he's being drafted, I think, like late 3rd, early 4th round right now.
Yeah, he's in the late 3rd right now.
So that's 3 to 4 rounds later. That's a huge value.
So there you go. That's what value is. And that value also, you're going to notice it on your draft cheat sheets. Okay. When you're looking at, and let's say you have set up there from Fantasy Pros, you have the average draft position listings for all the players. And you have, let's just say it, Robbins, who is being average draft is in the late 3rd round. And then all of a sudden you're in the 5th round and he's still there. Well, that the value is I don't care what other players are available, what other players you thought you wanted, the value is there. You're going to take them at that point. So that's what you're going to use that cheat sheet for, is to recognize value, because you're not going to recognize it if you don't have any of these draft tools up beforehand. If you don't go into draft prepared, knowing where players are picked, knowing what to be looking out for, you're at a big disadvantage. That's when you're not going to notice the value. And that's how a player like this would slip down to the late 4th round or the early 5th round, because people aren't realizing where he's being selected. So do your homework on these things, and it's going to help you out tremendously. All right. Waivers, that's when you cut a player from your team. He would go into a waiver. All right. The waivers do not automatically become free agents. What they have to do is they have to clear waivers. So there is also a term called waiver order. A waiver order is beginning of the year, you are selected a waiver position to start the year out. Let's say your position is number 1. When you decide to claim a waiver, and for the first time, your position is 1, you get precedence over everybody else. So let's say 7 people want the same guy. Because you were number 1, you get that guy. Once you use your waiver, you go back to the bottom of the list. We go to the back of the lines, Clyde.
that depends on the league too, because there are some leagues where they base the waivers off of how you're ranking, like your record. So if you're like the worst team, you will always get the first priority. So it'll go like you that guy picks that person picks their first player, and then everyone else gets a chance, and then after that it goes back to them, where they keep getting the first priority, and they can just kind of like select a bunch of guys. I don't like that way.
I don't like that either. Yeah.
It's kind of unfair for everybody, especially if a really, really awesome team bombed in the first week, and then they're able to grab, you know, 3 excellent players, and now their team's just overpowered.
Yeah, no, that's not. I don't think that's a fair way to do it. I like the go back, have a selection order and then go back to end line when you've made your selection that you got. But anyway, waivers. That's what happens when you. That's when you cut players. They go to the waivers. From the waivers, they go on the waiver wire, and people can at that point try to pick them up. If someone's not on waivers, let's say they were never drafted, that's a first come first serve type thing.
Yeah, so the whole waiver thing is just created so that everyone gets a fair opportunity to grab the players, and that someone just watching the game sees that, starting running back just got hurt, so then they instantly pick up the backup running back. So now they just got ahead of everybody because they were just paying attention and watching the game while other people were at work and they weren't able to. So typically during the game, starting on Thursday, waivers will start for players that played. And once they play, you cannot draft them until your waivers are set, which is typically like a Tuesday or Wednesday. And then everyone starts getting all those waiver players. And then after the waiver period ends and everyone made their picks, now everyone's a free agent. And now you can just go ahead and pick up whoever you want. Like Mark said, first come, first serve.
Yeah, you could tell them in the restaurant business, first come, first serve.
So the last term we'll talk about is the workhorse / 3-down running back. I believe this is the most important position in football, especially for PPR leagues. Now, these are the running backs that they are the guy, right? So they're in every single situation. It doesn't matter if they are at the goal line. It doesn't matter if they're just on a regular, 50-yard line, or if it's a pass play or a run play. This is the running back that the team relies on the most, and they get the bulk of the work. And these are the guys that tend to score the most in your fantasy league besides a quarterback, mainly because, they're still getting the running work, and that kind of balances with the wide receiver work. And then they also get this extra receiving work. And if you're in a PPR league, if they get 4 or 5 catches, that's 4 or 5 points. And then you add in the yards that they get, that's extra points. And if they got any touchdowns off of those catches, that's even more points. So these guys have the opportunity to outscore other positions and are my favorite.
Yeah, Shane right now, I'm going to tell you straight out, he is hoping Jonathan Taylor becomes the 3-down back, a 3-down back. Right now, He's sharing time with Nyheim Hines. Taylor showed that he can catch the ball. He showed he's very capable of it. But he's hoping that they will start using him more so and less of Hines come in the passing situations. I'm hoping the same thing for Akers.
Mm-hmm.
So they are not, last year, they were not considered workhorses, 3-down backs. We're hoping they evolve into that.
Yeah. And those workhorse guys, those are all the running backs that are being drafted in the first round.
Yes.
So we hope that you all are enjoying our Fantasy Football for Dummies by Dummies. We still have a few weeks to go of this, so I hope you guys find this of great value. So next week, we'll be going into finding the best league for you and what works for you. Because finding the best league is very, very important. And if you find the right league for you, you can find it to be a lot more enjoyable than other leagues that you might find to be complicated or just really frustrating.
So we appreciate you guys listening in. We, again, hope this has been very helpful. We enjoy doing this for you. We never want to talk over anybody's heads. There's, a lot of people out there will talk over your heads and talk all these different things, not explain what they mean because they think everybody in their audience understands it. we understand that's not the facts of it. We understand we know we have some new people listening to us that are maybe going to be doing the draft for the first time. So we thought this was important to do, and really because our goal really is to help you have fun and make money during the season. So this is the groundwork for it. This is this is the base of that. So we appreciate you guys listening in. You can look at this, all this terminology, everything we talked about, we're going to have on our website.
Yeah. And you can follow us on Twitter at the Pros FF and on Instagram, the Fantasy Football Pros, for any extra content. If you want to go to our website, we do have extra content there. You can also submit any questions. That's www.thefantasyfootballpros.com.
Everybody out there all across the world, have fun with fantasy football. It's a great way to interact with people and challenge your mind against other people's minds and just have fun with it.
Yeah. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.
See ya.